Today we're talking about inflammation and the pros and cons of it, right? Because if you're in pain, if you are dealing with persistent back pain, shoulder pain, knee pain, osteoarthritis, arthritis in general, fibromyalgia, all of those things, there's a level of inflammation that we need to talk about. So let's start with what inflammation is there for, because inflammation is supposed to help us. That's its whole basic design. Let's just say you sprain your finger, right? Bonk my finger, sprain it. First thing that happens, my body goes, ooh, there's damage, and sends blood cells to this area because it's sending all those blood cells to the area, which will help it heal. My knuckle would start to swell up because there's more blood in that area. And of course, with more blood and fluid in that area, it's going to restrict the joint. So there's two reasons we're going to talk about right here why inflammation is a good thing. One, the inflammation that happens is there to heal the joint. All right. So when all of that fluid goes into the joint, the blood cells go in there and they start working on repairing the joint itself. Here's the kicker. If I was to splint my finger for 8 weeks and just leave it in this position and not move it in any way, imagine the fluid that's in there is like a construction team and they're like, okay, we're going to fix this. Well, this joint doesn't seem to move, so let's just clean it up and get out of here. So I take the splint off, everything's atrophied, and now my finger's in a precarious situation because it's not used to moving and it's been healed in this position. So now, in order to move it, it's going to be harder to move it. It's going to be weaker. It's going to lose its range of movement, all those different things. So ideally, if you happen to sprain your finger, this goes for a whole bunch of joints, mind you. But if you happen to sprain your finger and say you splint it, because that's a good thing to do in the short term, but a few days later, you take the splint off and you start moving it a bit. You go, okay, well, I can move it about this far. It's still swollen. Don't force anything, but I'm going to move it gently, put the splint back on. Do that a few times a day, maybe a couple days later, put it on a surface, start kind of pretending to drag it, put some strength into it. And as you progressively do this, the fluid in that joint, all those blood cells are going, ooh, we need to heal this joint so that it can move and so that it can be strong. So that's what inflammation is for. Now, the second reason inflammation can be a good thing is that it restricts the movement of the joint. Okay. So essentially, if you were to like hurt your knuckle and you didn't have a splint, your finger's going to be kind of stuck in this position anyways, because it's going to be restricted in movement because of the inflammation. So inflammation is a good thing to help heal the body. Now, we've heard a lot about inflammation. If you've been listening to any of the knee osteoarthritis videos, we talked about pro-inflammation and anti-inflammation. So we're going to get into why inflammation turns into a bad thing. So what ends up happening is we can kind of look at a few different reasons inflammation turns into something not so good. Because depending on certain situations that we'll talk about in a sec, instead of just going to one site, as the inflammation goes to heal maybe my sprained finger, it now goes through my entire body, okay? Because the response doesn't know where the danger is. It just knows there's danger. So it's going all through the body constantly, all the time, looking for danger. So there's going to be inflammation in almost every single joint. That's not a good thing, especially if the joint's not damaged. Now, why does that happen? We're going to look at, there's two main reasons why that would happen in terms of not having a specific disease. okay? Because sometimes there could be a disease that creates that inflammation. But in terms of something where there's just that crankiness and our back just gets really sore, this is where we want to look at two things that might create more inflammation. One is diet. We're going to talk about that in a second. Okay. The second one is stress. Now, latest research is showing that even if you don't have a damaged joint, your body is going to react to something in the same way with that inflammation. So your body's going to turn around and go, oh, this person, they're worried about something. There's stress. I'm going to send inflammation. I'm going to check everything out. Well, that can be a good thing short term, right? As long as it only happens like 1 or 2 days. But imagine you have that stress level, that overload every single day, and your body is responding by sending out inflammation every day, maybe around like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, where you're exhausted. Okay. Well, we're going to talk about diet in a second, but just have gone through your day with this sense of overload. And now you hit a point where your body goes, stop, something's wrong. We're sending out the fluids to try and find the danger, but there's no danger. And every day this keeps happening. Now we end up with what's called systemic inflammation, where it's just a regular habit of our body to send this out. And the second we feel any stress with that danger response in any way, the body now gets that inflammation response. Not the best thing, because our body now isn't doing anything to heal anything. It's just chronically inflamed. And as we know, inflammation isn't a good thing. So the other reason that we end up with inflammation apart from stress is that lifestyle. Okay. So diet is a big part of it. Eating too many sugars. Okay. Sugar's not a good thing. Alcohol's not a good thing. And smoking's not a good thing. All those three things increase the amount of inflammation that goes out in the body. Now, we can look at that and be like, okay, well, I'm not going to quit smoking, or I really like having that beer on the weekend. One thing, it's not the easiest picture to try and clean up, but we have to start somewhere. So with what I'm going to say next, don't get overloaded with it, because we just want to take one step at a time. And realistically, here's the thing. I'm going to mention this at the end as well. I just want, if you find that inflammation of this lifestyle aspect, diet aspect, could be a big contributing factor, what I want you to write down is everything you eat, everything you put in your mouth, everything you eat, whatever you do for the next 2 days. Don't judge yourself. Don't think, oh, I shouldn't eat that chocolate because I'll have to write it down. Okay. Just honestly, without judgment, write down every single thing you eat for 2 days. That's it. After that 2 days, you're going to turn and look at what you wrote down and pick one thing to adjust. Okay. And I say adjust because let's say you look at that one thing and you're like, whoa, I ate 12 chocolates that day. That's probably a lot of sugar for my inflammation. Well, I'm just going to eat 5 next time. Okay. So I want you to see if you can just make one adjustment. That's it. I don't want this to be a big overloaded thing, because this next part of inflammation is also a contributing factor, but we've gotten to the point where every time we talk about it, it becomes a very hot topic. And that's the amount of fat we have in our body. Don't panic. I'm not asking you to lose weight, but one thing that does contribute to that inflammation response is the amount of fat that we have in the body. That's it. It's not that we need to lose all the weight. It's not that we need to lose the weight because the lighter weight is going to be easier on our knees. Because realistically, if you do happen to have knee osteoarthritis, you likely maybe have it in your fingers. If you have it in your fingers don't get loaded every day by the same amount of weight, but they still hurt. So it's not necessarily the physical load of the weight that is doing it. It's the amount of fat stores that we hold in our body that contribute to how quickly and how much the body reacts with inflammation. I hope that makes sense. So it's one thing that I'm personally working on right now and I'm actually using myself as an experiment. Because I have gained weight, and when I went for my last doctor checkup, I was like, oh, well, that's a lot more than I thought it was, because my clothes still fit me. But at the same time, my back pain has been more prevalent. So in learning that there's the possibility that the amount of fat stores that I have in my body may be contributing to the inflammation, which is likely contributing to the pain I'm experiencing. There's a whole bunch of things that can contribute to your pain experience. I'm now working on seeing if I lower the fat stores in my body, if that will reduce the inflammation that might be affecting my lower back. So I'll keep you posted. Ask. I don't know, you might be watching this like 6 months from now. Shoot me an email, see how it went. But it's one of those things that we're learning about. And instead of me just going to my pain doctor and saying, hey, my back hurts more now, and he goes, here's a prescription, or whatever he'd like to say, I know that it's not tissue damage in my back. Okay. It's cranky. And if it is related to the possible weight gain of 10 extra pounds and maybe fat storage in my body, I'm going to play with it and see if I can reduce my pain experience. So with that being said, inflammation is a pain in the back, but there are things that we can do to help lower that inflammation. Now, the first thing that pops into our head is, hey, I'm going to take a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory. However, a year and a half ago, research came out that that's not the best idea either, because chronic use of NSAIDs actually contributes to chronic pain. So that's not the greatest choice. Now, if you have pain that is an acute thing, by all means, grab that NSAID, whatever needs to help that acute part, use it. If it's a flare-up, use it. But if you happen to be using NSAIDs regularly, it's something you might want to talk to your doctor about, but it's something you need to go into with open eyes, all right? If you're working with me and we're working towards creating less pain anyway, let's keep going. But taking NSAIDs every day is not the best solution. It might be a solution, but go into it with open eyes, all right? And it's always a great discussion to have with your doctor. If you need some backup resources, let me know. I'll try and put something together for that, because some doctors don't know. We can't keep up on all the research. There's just so much out there. So with that being said, anti-inflammatory, we need to up how much we can create better situations for that inflammatory response. One, losing some fat stores, okay? like I said, look at your diet, write down your 2 days worth of things. And realistically, if you start taking out the sugars, okay, and the ultra processed foods, putting in just normal, I want to say normal. I live in a bubble. To me, normal is whole foods, like cooking from fresh vegetables. I know it's a very privileged space to be able to just go out and buy some fresh vegetables that you need, but being able to make food from a more whole food position is the best way to go. There's no specific diet. I don't want to say do this diet, do that diet. Generally, it's considered that Mediterranean diet. I go to the grocery store, shop around the perimeter of the grocery store where all the whole food stuff is, eat very little ultra processed food, right? See what you can do. Like I said, write it down for 2 days, make one adjustment. Start there. That's it. Don't change everything all at once. That's a lot of work. If you increase your activity levels, increasing your activity levels to something that's not going to overload you helps with inflammation, and it helps lose those fat stores. Win-win, right? There are anti-inflammatory foods that you can consume more of. Do a Google search. There's tons out there. Really, whole foods, veggies, and drinking water. I do also take quercetin. I started taking quercetin because I was having allergies. And I've recently found out that it's also an anti-inflammatory agent, an anti-inflammatory supplement. So it's just a win-win there for me. But again, that's a supplement that is out there if you wanted to try it. Always chat with a nutritionist, a doctor, talk to them about it as well. You can message me if you have any questions. And yeah, anti-inflammatory. Smoking is very pro-inflammatory. Alcohol is very pro-inflammatory. But it's part of our culture, depending on your smoking situation or your drinking situation. But again, if you can cut back on anything, that's going to be a positive step in the right direction. So in terms of inflammation, it can be quite detrimental. Like it's pervasive how easy it can just keep kicking in. I mean, even a thought of stress can kick in that inflammatory response if that's what your body's used to already doing. So learn, take tiny steps. Don't change your entire life at once, because that's just way too much work and sets you up for disaster, as we know. So one small step at a time. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Otherwise, I'll catch you in the next video, hopefully with no sprained finger.